We're going to get started with our first Temple 9-minute pod. I'm thinking back on the conversation that we've had over the years, Henrik, about Anthony Deaton and Edelweiss and how he had this value of watching for businesses that had gone through substantial change outside of their control, like companies that had survived world wars or unplanned relocations and so on. And then we started to build up this conversation around the ideal business, and an internal way we talk about it is compounding machines, businesses that keep stacking wins. Henrik, you've been a maverick in both poker, investments, and business design now, and you have a passion to create enterprises that both have a conscience and create unstoppable growth. So I think that definitely does fit in to the compounder description. So in this first podcast, we want to look at how do those companies do it? How does one spot a compounder? Is it possible to, and how you can apply this thinking to your own career, investments, or your own startup? So let's get into it.
I think I was playing around with this interest on interest calculators when I was like maybe 14, 15, something like this. And I heard about this concept. And this is kind of the foundation of this compounding companies. They work in the same way. The sort of where that interest can take you just mathematically is, I think, almost quite hard for us to understand. And especially if you look at sort of 20 years or 30 years, becomes quite extraordinary. Probably like kind of coming from actually just doing the mathematical and kind of just visualize it with a calculator.
I remember like way back that we'd look at those calculators, and I just wanted, like, before that part, was that something that when you were doing the poker, like, that was that something that you were looking at? Like, was it then that you took the interest in compound, or was it really when you moved into the business building?
I did poker very early, so I started to play this when I was 15. I was kind of, one thing that I knew with the poker was like the money that I was earning with poker, I knew that they were worth more to me because of my age, because of the time that they would compound. And I also remember sort of even when I myself kind of stopped school quite early on, I kind of had an understanding that, okay, well, if I start now with actually having a real income, it's actually worth a lot more than continue to study, to go to university, and you kind of get more your real job almost sometimes even after like kind of 85.
Break it down for us a little bit. Like, what is the one metric that you most like to track to help you spot a true compounding business, either when you're creating one or like if you're looking at it in terms of companies you'd invest in?
A compounder is more or less like it's an ideal business. A good business is a business that has high returns on equity. Those returns are basically free cash flow. What that means essentially is that the income that the business is earning, you could take out a very large percentage of those, and you don't have to reinvest it. And the company and the business, it would kind of stay stable, like, so it wouldn't lose its earnings, compared to more a worse business where you kind of make money, but in a way you never make money because you have to constantly reinvest into the business. So you have to buy new equipment, you have to spend a lot of marketing to sort of retain your customers, or you have to develop sort of new technology maybe which you're selling. So you have to constantly do this and constantly reinvest. There's a concept around owners earnings.
And then that leads us to number 3, which is the ideal business, the compounder. So this is a company which is throwing off lots of cash flow, but it doesn't have the problem that it doesn't need to find another niche or sector or doing that. It isn't under the same pressure to go outside of its current expertise.
Yes.
To make, so it's basically stays.
Exactly. Kind of continue play the same game for a really, really long period of time. If you think about a more kind of like maybe consumer facing one, I think something like Costco could be it. In terms of what they've been doing, it's quite similar, and it will be similar for, I think, a very long period of time.
A company like Costco can kind of keep investing in its line of products, which could be infinite. And now, obviously, I don't know how they operate online, but if you have infinite shelf space, like in a digital platform, you can constantly extend that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just the business itself is quite basic in the need, or like the what they do for customers. I mean, they give customers good prices and good quality, and it's very universal. That's going to be true in 100 years time. So that's one, is that they sort of is a very basic problem that they solve. Let's say reinvestment plan is pretty straightforward and pretty obvious. So the reinvestment is obvious, and that it's within the circle of competence of the business. I think that's one of the kind of key things for these compounders. You don't want it to be, what are they going to do with their money? You know, those questions come up. It's way less likely it's a compounder.
When you were talking there, I was thinking that one of the books that we go back to sometimes is Outsiders. Is that Thorndike?
Yeah, Thorndike. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a really, really, really good book, actually. And I think it's a good book because it's quite often in business, there is this thing where, oh, someone is a known business leader, and let's write about them, or have that story, where his approach was a bit different. So he kind of went out and actually took a sort of data-driven approach, and just looking at, okay, who had the best track records. This is also a little bit for me, like in terms of my background in poker, I kind of saw a similar thing there, where there were a lot of players that were quite famous poker players, and there were others that were not known at all because they were maybe playing online. Some of the most famous ones, they were actually not near as good as some of these completely anonymous players.
I think for our listenership, we're going to do another one of these next week, one of the Temple's 9-minute pods, and maybe we'll break down the 3 rules that would separate the fakers from the actual makers next week, and see the ones that actually can scale.
Perfect.
Okay, cool.